Barkley's return to RB1 relevancy, breaking down the running back rankings 11 through 15, starting right now on the Razzball Fantasy Football Podcast. That's right, folks. It's officially a Homer podcast because we're going to be talking a little bit about one of my Giants, Saquon Barkley, today as we cover the next batch of running backs in our running back ranking show. First off, I would like to apologize to the Razzball listeners because we did promise top 5 receivers, but we lied and we apologize. So instead, we're going to do some running backs 11 through 15. And today's show, we want to make sure is always going to be on the Razzball Fantasy YouTube channel. So please make sure you subscribe, leave a comment, like to the Razzball Fantasy Football Pod on the Razzball Fantasy YouTube channel. And if you like snippets, if you like quick hitters, we have Razzball Fantasy on YouTube, on IG and TikTok as well. But also make sure you're going to razzball.com, folks. We have the best ADP tool in the industry. I am not joking you. It's customizable. You can export it to Excel. I'm telling you, if you haven't explored it, it is fantastic. It's been updated this week. Got to go check it out. Also, Consensus Dynasty rookie rankings. And then finally, make sure you go to razzball.com for your baseball, hockey, and basketball content as well. Let's bring in my esteemed colleague and my co-host for today, Mr. Donkey Teeth. What's going on, buddy?
What's happening? Yeah, we got to keep the listeners on their toes and switch it out to running backs again.
I know. So listen, you can make sure you're following Donkey Teeth at DonkeyTeeth87 on Twitter. We're breaking down all his great articles. He'll be dropping the latest version of his running back rankings over the weekend, probably Monday or Tuesday. It's a holiday weekend, folks. We all have a little fun, so might be a little bit later than expected. But today we're going to be talking about running backs 11 through 15. Now we're starting to talk about some of those back end of the second round running backs, that 2-3 turn. Maybe these running backs you could pair with a Jonathan Taylor, a CMC. So I'm excited to talk about them today. And how we're going to do it, we're going to start at 15 and go down to 11. So DT, at number 15, you have Zeke Elliott currently at your running back rankings. His ADP is RB17. So you're slightly ahead of consensus. Tell the people why. What do you know about Zeke that we don't?
Nothing. I really don't know much, Bobby. I'm surprised that anybody listens to me. But I've been fading Zeke for the past 2 seasons. So it's a little bit of a strange feeling for me to actually be ahead of consensus on Zeke. I feel like the hate has gone a little bit too far here. And we're actually, Bobby, you and I were just interviewing a new potential Razzball writer that said exactly the same things that I was just writing about Zeke earlier today. Tony Pollard is a threat a little bit, but most backfields have somebody taking some portion of the work. Zeke has a ton of carries. And this is what I've been saying the past two seasons. The workload really is piling up. He's got 1,650 career carries over his six season career, which is a lot. And running backs break down at this point, but Zeke, his body seems to hold up better than most. He's only 27 still, despite the mileage. He's in a really high powered offense. They're going to score a lot of points down there in Dallas. Fantastic offensive line, one of the best offensive lines. I just don't understand how Zeke doesn't put up, back end RB1 numbers. He's going to get 250 touches a season as long as he's healthy. So, health is a risk with any running back. I thought he was overvalued the past couple seasons. Now, I'm thinking he's undervalued.
So I think with Zeke it really comes down to his points per game. He somehow, through all the injuries last year, finished pretty much playing every game. And his points per game rank was 19. So I do think that sometimes when a guy plays a full season or 16 or 17 games, they get bumped up in the overall standings. But when you just drill down into him, and of course you do have PPR, do full, so that's a little bit of a different wrinkle. The problem I have with Zeke is that Tony Pollard did take a huge chunk of his overall touches last year versus what he used to get in the past. Now, we could blame the injury, but it's also his efficiency numbers weren't terrible. So typically I like to say, all right, maybe he just had an off year efficiency-wise. He really didn't. His fantasy points per every rush attempt was right on par with his career. So what really happened was that we saw that downtick and the uptick for Tony Pollard and the downtick for Zeke. If you look at his weighted opportunities, basically where he got his touches, he would have finished as the RB14 last year. His career efficiency points per game, basically applying his touches from last year versus his career efficiency, would have been RB18 instead of 19. Like I just said, his number 1 rated offensive line lost 2 of their key starters in the offseason. They did draft a kid in the first round, and they do have some nice depth, but that's still going to be a shakeup. What happens if Zeke was the RB19 behind the number one running offensive line in football? So that's why I'm a little concerned. I think that's why I might have him outside my top 15, but I don't blame you. I think he's a safe pick now in the third round, so I don't disagree with you there. Let's jump down to number 14. Leonard Fournette, his current ADP is RB13, so you're kind of right in line there with Fournette. I personally have him in my top 10. So talk to me a little bit about Fournette. Maybe I'm a little too high. What's your thoughts on Fournette in 2022?
You know, I'm not against what you've got there. I don't think you're too high. I think he probably deserves it. It's just one of those things when I start to match him up against another guy, it's like, Leonard Fournette, not sexy. Antonio Gibson, sexy.
That's a shot at Fournette. I didn't realize we were talking about looks today on the pod. All right.
No, actually, I think he's a very good-looking man. But yeah, in terms of fantasy, he's just lost his luster. You know, back when he was in his second season, he was very sexy. So it's just kind of the cycle of being a fantasy football asset as these players. We end up looking at them, but yeah, it's hard. It's hard to knock Fournette too much. I mean, what has changed here? He's got Brady back. He's behind, again, one of the best offensive lines in the game. This offense is going to score a ton of points. He's a veteran. He's got Tom Brady's trust. Most important is protecting Tom Brady. He's going to be shocking if Rachaad White comes in and really puts any sort of dent in Fournette's time on the field. So he was RB7 last year in half PPR leagues. He's still, again, only 27 years old, and he's got quite a bit less mileage than Zeke does. So no reason to think he can't be a top 10 running back again next season. I think these guys are pretty darn close in my rankings. Really, the difference between number 10 and 14 is not much for me, so I don't blame you.
Yeah. Now, listen, the first 13 games before he got hurt last year, he was 18.6 PPR points per game, easily RB4. So he showed his top 5 upside. The other thing is there has been a lot of studies to show that there is a correlation between tight end targets and running back targets. And when you take Gronk out of the picture, maybe more targets start heading towards Leonard Fournette in that aspect. So there might be a little bump for him there as well. However, if you look at the changes, if they did lose 2 of their interior offensive linemen, but the thing I like about Tampa, number 1, they have the number 2 PFF offensive line at the end of the season. They immediately replaced one of those guards with Shaq Mason from the Patriots, and then they drafted a kid in the second round. So I do like how they retooled that line. But I just think that with Brady and company, I am going to keep him in my top 10 because we see the top 5 upside overall. So let's jump down to number 13. This one might be a little controversial in the sense we have no idea if he's going to be suspended or not. It's Alvin Kamara. I think a lot of us would have him easily in our top 10 if we felt comfortable with no suspension. But what's your thoughts about Alvin Kamara? Did the suspension impact this ranking, or is this based on the fact that you just don't trust the team right now?
Yeah, I'm not factoring it in all that much, and I may end up bumping him down, actually. I mean, last year he had a career high in rushes. He had 240 rushes. His previous career high was 194, and he had a career low in targets, receptions, yards per carry. So you really immediately see that impact of Drew Brees leaving on, the Saints offense as a whole, but Kamara as well. So I just think that it is weird ranking a guy like Kamara that for so long was an easy top 3 running back in any sort of PPR format this low. But again, when I start stacking him up against the guys above, what has changed here that is going to make Kamara produce better numbers than last year? He did get unlucky with the touchdowns, only 4 touchdowns. We know that's pretty random, but he still had 5 receiving touchdowns. Even if you add a couple more rushing touchdowns on there, I mean, you can't project him for double-digit touchdowns. That's just silly, in my opinion, in that offense now. So I think that he's a little bit overvalued, and he's not going to be a guy that I'm drafting if he doesn't get suspended.
I forgot to mention his current ADP is RB9, so you are behind consensus RBs based on Razzball.com ADP. So go check it out, folks.
What's going into those ADPs there, Bobby? How many sites are we?
That's a great question, DT. We actually have 6 wonderful sites, a combination of Best Ball for those hot, latest rankings. But then we got Yahoo, ESPN, and Sleeper. So if you're looking for that redraft focus and you want to get a head start, we have that too. You can export it as well if you want to manipulate the data.
it's really so great at this time of year because the sample is so small with a lot of these sharper draft platforms. Like I was looking at NFC, who hosts our Razzball format, and there's like, over the past month, there's only been 100 and not even, it was like 76 drafts or something. Yeah, 196 since June 1st in NFC. So not a huge sample there, but once you conglomerate all those together, you really get a better picture.
Oh yeah, folks, go check out my tutorial video online too. It's a great. There's so much functionality to it. It's amazing. But Kamara, anyway, when I look at Kamara, it's one of those situations where I was genuinely surprised when I did my research how much better he was with Jameis Winston. So the first handful of weeks 1 through 7 with Winston, he averaged 20 PPR points per game. That drops all the way down to 16 after that. The other problem with Kamara, like you brought up, though, there was nobody competing with him for targets. And they had Marquise Callaway, and now they have 3 receivers that are better than that probably demand more looks out of him because he was averaging 12 points per game just from receiving production last year with Winston. So it is a little bit concerning. Plus, it sounds like he's going to get suspended. So I think as soon as it comes down, I think pretty much most people will fade him. And I think really the question comes really quick, DT. If he falls to the 4th with a 6-game suspension, would you still draft him in that range?
No, I wouldn't. There's other guys that we're about to talk about here that I'd much prefer in that range.
Okay, let's jump down to my guy, my boy, Saquon Barkley. Now, Barkley currently today is going RB14. You have him up at 12, so you are ahead of consensus a little bit there. So talk to us a little bit about Barkley and why you think he's going to be an RB1 in 2022.
I mean, I can't quit Saquon. He's just such a freak athlete. See Bobby with your hand in there.
It's a long story. Anyway, for everyone just to waste everyone's time here, it's the focus on my camera. You have to put your hand and then zoom out, and then it refocuses. So yes, but go ahead. Sorry, everybody.
So I said Fournette's not sexy. Saquon is still so sexy. I mean, every time he touches the ball, you just want to watch this guy. It's this tug of war for me between fading the Giants offense, which has just been so disappointing for, I don't know, how many years in a row, Bobby?
Too many. It's always infinite. It's like since 2011.
All right. So, but I want to bet on the freak athlete is what it comes down to. Saquon's coming off of basically 2 lost seasons, but his talent level, there's not many guys that we've seen in our generation that are on that level. And so you look back at somebody like Adrian Peterson, that's the comp to me, that kind of just freak. And Adrian Peterson didn't matter what offense he's in, he gets it done. And I think Saquon is pretty similar once he's fully healthy. So I wouldn't be shocked if Saquon, puts up top tier, top 2, 3. I wouldn't be surprised if he was the number 1 running back, to be honest, if everything shakes out right.
With Barkley, so I have Barkley at 11, and I feel like I'm too low on him. So when you look at Barkley, you have to, and I hate throwing out things because it's not really good to just throw out games. But if you're a Giants fan, you know that there was a block of games with whatever the crap Mike Glennon and whoever they were throwing out there at quarterback, that it was just so inept. It wasn't even a thing. And they actually ran a QB sneak on like 3rd and 8, folks, in like their own end zone. That's how bad it got, right? So I want to take every game last year essentially with a grain of salt. But they had the 30th offensive line last year, but they added Evan Neal. They brought in Mark Glasgow from the Indianapolis Colts. They've really revamped that offensive line. But if you just look at his points per game with Daniel Jones, he goes from 11.6 to 14.1. That would have been RB21 last year in points per game in PPR. But if you apply his career efficiency on the touches he got, now remember how inept that offense was? So he wasn't generating anything behind a 30th offensive line. If you take his efficiency on those touches he had last year, it would have jumped to 17.4 points per game, RB10 last year. So there's a nice path for him to bounce back just on that alone. Plus, don't forget, Brian Daboll, before this Josh Allen high-volume passing offense, way back in the day, he gave Reggie Bush, Peyton Hillis, and Jamal Charles all their career high in carries and rushing yards in their career. So he is a stud at the run game too. So I would not be surprised if Saquon Barkley has a bounce back. And my final point, we always remember Barkley's done it before. He's been an RB1 in fantasy. And a lot of people don't like to go back in time, but like Todd Gurley, when he had his breakout with Sean McVay, just 2 years earlier, he had his breakout rookie campaign, then a down season. So it could happen with Barkley as well. Now, this one might be the biggest surprise. Let's jump down to number 11, Antonio Gibson, which I feel right now is much higher than what you'll see, RB21 in our ADP. Tell us a little bit about why you haven't given up on Gibby yet.
I mean, he's been banged up a lot over the first two seasons of his career, but he's been able to grind through it. And I think when we had Andy Behrens on to discuss the rookie draft that we did for the Dynasty rookie draft, I think he brought up Gibson as well. Maybe I'm thinking of Heath Cummings. I don't really remember who it was that we discussed Antonio Gibson with, but I agree with the sentiment. I think he's getting very undervalued here. And this is the guy that can be had in the 4th round when you're asking me about Kamara. I'm super bullish on Gibson. You know, they're bringing in Brian Robinson. McKissick is still there. So you can look at that as a negative, but in situations like this, to a certain degree, I think it's a positive. You know, we talk about somebody like Dalvin Cook on the last show that we did. He's breaking down the time you need him every single season. He's wearing down, and then your fantasy playoffs come around. It's like, oh, I've got to have his handcuffed the entire season. So, you know, there's something to be said for taking a little bit of that weight off all season. And we know that Antonio Gibson can get the job done in any sort of PPR format with 15 carries a game. He's a beast in the passing game. Now we've got Carson Wentz, improved offensive line again, amazing hands. Even with McKissick there last year, he's a huge factor in the pass game still. So super versatile player. I love Antonio Gibson. He has massive upside. And honestly, I can't understand why he's going in the 4th round.
So I think a lot of it has to do with his the fractured shin, and then everything fell apart. And then a lot of it also has to do with the fact that he didn't really break out. A lot of people's perception is until McKissick went down last year. However, I looked into this, and there is a pre and post bye difference. It's huge. So before the bye, he was dealing with all the straining. That was the Jarrett Patterson game right before the bye. He had 8 carries. Everything was on fire. Panic. I was the meme. It's fine because I had Antonio Gibson in every league, and I'm like, just like, hey, at this point, it's all over. He was averaging 16 touches per game pre-bye. That jumps to 21.5 post-bye. His yards combined from 73 to 93, but he goes from 12.5 PPR points per game to 16.9. So, and then the first thing you're going to say is, well, that was all without McKissick. That's not true. Weeks 10 through 12, the first 3 weeks post-bye, with McKissick in the lineup, he averaged 27 touches a game, 106 yards, and 17.6 points per game. So, yes, I think that, to me, it just seemed like they were like, all right, his leg was bothering him, and they gave him the touches over the second half. The bigger problem, though, was the losses versus wins. If you look at his stats in losses versus wins, he averaged 15 touches per game in losses, 23.1 in wins. His points per game goes from 11.3, which is in PPR like an RB30, to 17.4, which is top 10 in wins. So I think that with Carson Wentz in the fold, with Ron Rivera running that defense, maybe they are more competitive, which is a better sign for Antonio Gibson. But this still 17.4 to 17.6 points per game in PPR would be RB9. So I do think RB11 is aggressive because you might be drafting him at a ceiling if you get to that point. But like you said, in the 4th round, I think maybe we fell too much on him, so we might be buying him in 2022. All right, folks, that's all we got for today for the RB Ranking Show. Once again, thank you to my co-host, Donkey Teeth. You can find Donkey Teeth at DonkeyTeeth87 on Twitter, but make sure you're going to Razzball.com to check out his articles on the RB rankings. They are fantastic. They're insightful, but they're also unique, folks. No copy and pasting at Razzball.com. That's how we do it. Make sure you're also following us on Razzball Fantasy YouTube channel. We're breaking down videos every day, basically, at this point. Make sure you're going to Razzball Fantasy on YouTube and IG as well. Check out all the great content we got there going as well. Once again, I'm your host, Bobby Marcoux. Thank you again, Donkey Teeth. We're out of here, folks.